So, Farron, we've got Donald Trump is sucking up a lot of the oxygen, literally and figuratively, in terms of the news. And, of course, we will talk more about Donald Trump, and his investigations and his administrations. But there is one person who is really desperately trying to both lay low and also present himself to those who might be starting to worry about Donald Trump's durability as a potential option. And of course, I'm talking about Mike Pence. And just to remind people, this is a guy who spent his time in Congress, became governor of Indiana. By the time Donald Trump had picked him, he was not Chris Christie unpopular in his state, but pretty close. His favorability ratings were stuck in the low 40s, high 30s. He proved himself to be a rather bad chief executive in terms of that government, not to mention having all of the immorality in many respects of a conservative governance. I think on this program, I interviewed an attorney who told us about Mike Pence's attempt to take funding away from foster parents of kids with disabilities. But Mike Pence is walking a fairly tight rope, isn't he, Farron?
It was really interesting over the last week to see how adamant this man had to become after the big New York Times story saying, look, Republicans are gearing up for a non-Trump 2020, which happened last weekend. And so Pence, had to come out just absolutely vehement that, no, I am not running for president. I am a supporter of Donald Trump. I love everything this man has done. He is a great leader. Don't look at me. I'm not running, which, look, all of the signs point to the fact that Mike Pence understands that Donald Trump is probably not going to make it 4 years. And even if he does, they're going to primary him. They're going to challenge him in some way. And Mike Pence understands that, hey, look, I'm probably the guy closest to this. I might have a real shot at usurping my boss, but I can't let him know this publicly because God knows how much Donald Trump only respects people tolerates people that are unquestionably loyal to him. So Pence, yeah, as you point out, he's in a real tight spot right now with all these news reports surfacing. And to be honest, the stories first came out back in late May, early June about the fact that he had created this political action committee, that he was raising money, that he was meeting with wealthy Republican donors. So technically what the New York Times reported out wasn't anything new. It was just to a much larger audience, one that obviously caught Trump's attention here.
Well, I mean, look, there's two aspects. There's one, you're right. The Mike Pence is engaging in behavior that one engages in if you're going to be running for an election, not 8 years from now. All right. And now, and like you say, maybe it's because Mike Pence believes that there's a decent chance that Donald Trump will not serve out his term. Or maybe Mike Pence is contemplating after 4 years of Donald Trump, there may be an appetite for someone else to run against him. But, the other problem, or look, it's conceivable that Donald Trump might say, I'm not going to run for re-election.
Right.
I mean, who knows? But clearly Mike Pence is setting up some sort of campaign. And, the thing that he's also got to be careful of is not just the ire of Donald Trump, who might not appreciate him being overshadowed, but also Donald Trump's supporters. Donald Trump's, it is the case that Donald Trump's base is shrinking slightly, but it is still slightly. And in just about every state around the country, you cannot find one where Donald Trump's Republican support is lower than 75%. And people should know that that Barack Obama, at his lowest ebb amongst Democrats, was below 75%. So Republicans are sticking with Donald Trump, and Mike Pence understands this. He doesn't want to get on the wrong side of that. because, of course, you'll get punished by those Republican primary voters. And so he's really got to, he's walking a very, very fine line here. And it's going to be interesting if he dials it back. But part of this, too, it seems to me, Farron, is that he's really relying on Donald Trump's ignorance as a human being to not realize that Mike Pence is setting himself up.
Well, that's what's so interesting about that is that Pence has been carrying out most of this, obviously, without Donald Trump looking over his shoulder every few hours, which, you know, Donald Trump, you spend a lot of time on the golf course. You're not necessarily paying attention to what your underlings are doing there. But Mike Pence, again, this has been happening for months. This infrastructure that he's creating for not running for president is something that's been going on for quite some time. He's meeting with the donors. And to me, that is where, you know, Pence has his strength. The wealthy, hardcore Republican donors, the people who want to get the most out of a Republican presidency, they know that Donald Trump can't necessarily be controlled. He can't be trusted. He's not a leader, so he can't necessarily get things done and passed. But Mike Pence is the last of the, I guess you would call them, traditional Republicans in this administration, now with Reince Priebus gone. So Pence is the only outlet through which some of these wealthy Republicans have, the only classical, you know, Bush-era Republicans still in there, while the rest of them are more of the alt-right type that helped get Trump elected. So Pence is in a good position himself with these donors. With Trump himself, you know, we've seen Trump's reaction to this New York Times story, saying once again, several times a day, in fact, this week, that the New York Times is failing, when in reality, the real irony is that the New York Times is actually doing better than it has in years because of Donald Trump. So, look, I think Pence is in a fairly good position, again, with the exception of maybe his standing with his boss. But those wealthy Republican donors understand Pence is their last door into this administration. And should Donald Trump get mad and decide to replace him, he's going to lose a lot of backing amongst the traditional conservatives when it comes time for re-election.
And let me just add, and we got to go to break, but Mike Pence is about as much in the pocket of the Koch brothers as you can get. I mean, Indiana, when he was governor, was basically considered a testing ground for the Koch brothers' policies. There was many Koch brother type of aides who went through that place. Pence was the president of the Indiana Policy Review Foundation, which is part of the State Policy Network, which was a super right-wing organization at the time as a governor. So people, forget. But Mike Pence is the Koch brothers. He is one of the guys who can bring together the Koch brothers and those Christian fundamentalists. So Donald Trump, beware. All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.